In the world where first impressions decide everything, Catherine Bennett was about to break all the rules. She didn't know that taking her 7-year-old daughter to a job interview would change not only her life, but also the heart of a CEO who had forgotten how to smile. Before we dive into the story, leave a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Catherine Bennett stood outside the imposing brick and glass headquarters of Harrison Technologies, her hand holding her daughter's fingers tighter than she intended. The Miami heat stuck to her skin, even though it was only 9 in the morning, and her blouse was already damp with nervousness. She glanced down at Sophie, her daughter, who was staring at the building with a mixture of awe and boredom. "Mom," Sophie said, squinting. "Are we late?" "No," Catherine lied, forcing a smile. "We're just early enough to be impressive." The truth was, her stomach was in knots. She had 30 minutes to make her case to the most exclusive tech firm in the Southeast, and she was bringing a child to the interview. Not exactly ideal. The babysitter had cancelled at 7:42 a.m., precisely 2 minutes after Catherine had finished printing her portfolio. There was no plan B. There hadn't been a plan B for months. The last few freelance projects barely paid the rent, and her emergency savings had vanished somewhere between Sophie's dental work and the failing car transmission. Now, this meeting, this chance, was everything. They walked through the front doors into a quiet, modern lobby, cooled by the soft hum of air conditioning and the gentle gurgle of a built-in water wall. A woman in a navy blouse sat behind a wide reception desk. Her nails clicked rapidly on the keyboard before she looked up with a polite but distracted smile. "May I help you?" "Catherine Bennett," she said, trying to inject some firmness into her voice. "I have a 10 o'clock interview with Human Resources." The receptionist glanced at Sophie, then back at Catherine. A flash of something unreadable crossed her face. "Please have a seat," she said. "I'll let them know you've arrived." Catherine nodded and guided Sophie to the far corner of the room, where a small waiting area held leather chairs and glossy company magazines. She sat, smoothed her skirt, and opened her portfolio again. She'd already checked it 3 times, but she needed to do something with her hands. "Mom," Sophie whispered, pulling on her arm. "Why does everyone look like they're going to church?" Catherine followed her daughter's gaze. Sleek suits, calm, rehearsed expressions. Everyone moved like they belonged, because they want to impress the people upstairs, she said, brushing a curl from Sophie's forehead. "Just like I do." "But you already draw good." Catherine smiled, a small crack forming in her composure. "Well, sometimes being good isn't enough, sweetie. Sometimes people need to believe in you." Sophie tilted her head. "I believe in you." Before Catherine could answer, the receptionist's voice cut across the lobby. "Miss Bennett, Mr. Harrison will see you now." Catherine's heart stopped. "Mr. Harrison," she echoed. "I thought it was HR." "Change of plans," the woman said, already walking briskly toward the elevator. "He likes to vet candidates personally for creative positions." Catherine shot a look at Sophie, whose eyes went wide. "Am I going too?" The receptionist paused, gave a shrug that felt more like a test, then turned back to the elevator without another word. Catherine knelt, her hands shaking as she reached for Sophie's shoulders. "Okay, listen closely. You sit on the bench outside the office. You stay quiet. You play on your tablet. If you need me, you just wait for the receptionist to come back. Don't come in unless there's a dragon." Sophie grinned. "No dragons, got it." Catherine kissed her forehead, pressed her palms against her thighs to stop the trembling, and followed the receptionist through long, echoing hallways lined with floor-to-ceiling windows. Then the door opened, and there he was. Michael Harrison stood at the far end of the office, looking out at the Miami River as if it held answers no one else could see. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with salt and pepper hair. His suit looked expensive, but was worn with the indifference of someone who had stopped caring what people thought a long time ago. He didn't turn when she entered. "Catherine Bennett," she said softly, stepping inside. "Thank you for taking the time to meet with me." Still facing the window, his voice came, cool even. "You're late." She blinked. I apologize. I had to check in. And I don't care why, he said, turning now. His face was unreadable, but his eyes, grey, sharp and tired, locked onto her like a spotlight. I don't value excuses, only results. Catherine swallowed. Understood. He gestured to the small table between them. Your portfolio. She stepped forward, placed the leather-bound folder down carefully, and opened it to the first page. As she began to talk about color theory, design ethics, visual storytelling, her voice trembled, then steadied, but he didn't nod, didn't comment, didn't blink. It was like presenting to a stone wall. She turned to a page featuring her redesign of a non-profit brand. This campaign increased donations by 40%. The door creaked open suddenly. Mommy, my game froze again. Sophie. Catherine's stomach plummeted. Michael's expression didn't change. His gaze slid to the child in the doorway, then slowly back to Catherine. I'm so sorry, she began, reaching for Sophie, mortified. But Michael held up a hand, not to dismiss, not to command, just to pause. He bent down slightly, to the child's eye level. Sophie tilted her head, studying him with an innocent intensity. You look sad, she said, matter-of-factly. Michael blinked. The air shifted. Catherine's heart was thundering. Sophie took a step closer. When I feel sad, hugs make it better. Before Catherine could stop her, Sophie stepped forward and wrapped her arms around his legs, small and sure, and completely unafraid. It was the kind of hug that asked for nothing. Michael stood motionless. His hands hovered awkwardly in the air. Then, slowly, one settled on the child's back for just a second, a whisper of contact. When Sophie pulled away, she smiled up at him. See? Better. Michael looked down at her, then up at Catherine. Something unspoken passed between them. You're not like the others, he said finally, his voice low. Most come in with arrogance. You came in real. He turned to the portfolio, didn't open it. You start on Monday. Catherine blinked. But you didn't even... I've seen enough. He looked back at Sophie. It's rare to meet someone who says exactly what they mean. Catherine could barely breathe. Thank you, she whispered. Michael nodded once. Deborah will handle your onboarding. You'll work directly with my design team. He was already turning back to the window as Catherine walked out, Sophie skipping beside her. Mom, Sophie whispered as they entered the hallway. Did I mess up? Catherine laughed, her eyes bright. No, sweetie. I think you might have just saved everything. As the elevator doors closed behind them, Michael stood staring out at the skyline. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. The office air felt different on Monday morning. Catherine stood at the edge of the open concept space on the third floor of Harrison Technologies. Her new ID badge was clipped awkwardly to her blouse. Her portfolio bag hung from her shoulder, still packed with everything she hadn't needed to use in that surreal interview. People looked up from their desks as she walked in, not hostile but curious. Some whispered, some smiled politely, some didn't bother to hide their surprise. She wasn't exactly the type of person who got hired here. Modern desks, glass walls, sleek tech stations. Everything was pristine, intimidating, and expensive, like walking onto the set of a movie where no one had told her she had a part to play. A woman in tailored trousers and a rust-colored blazer approached with swift efficiency. Early 40s, straight posture, clipboard in hand. You must be Catherine. I'm Deborah Martinez, HR Director. Welcome aboard. Catherine extended her hand, trying to mirror her confidence. Thank you. I'm very grateful. Deborah's handshake was firm, brief. Mr. Harrison asked me to onboard you personally. You'll be working directly with the creative team starting today. Your desk is by the south windows. Of course, Catherine said, her voice thinner than she intended. You made quite an impression, Deborah added, walking briskly ahead. Not many people get hired on the spot, even fewer with their children in tow. Catherine flushed. That wasn't exactly planned. Deborah glanced over her shoulder, unreadable. Sometimes the best things aren't. They stopped at a corner desk overlooking the Miami River. A small, potted plant waited next to a monitor. Catherine set her bag down, trying not to let her fingers shake. You'll be working on a new visual strategy for our outreach initiative. Michael, Mr. Harrison, is overhauling the entire philanthropic division. Catherine raised an eyebrow. He didn't mention any of that during the interview. Deborah gave a tight smile. He rarely explains his decisions. You'll get used to it. Before Catherine could reply, a voice cut through the space like the sudden toll of a clock tower bell. Ms. Bennett, she turned. Michael stood near the stairwell wearing a slate-grey shirt rolled to the elbows, a paper cup in one hand, and the same unreadable expression she remembered from the interview, only softer around the edges. The entire office seemed to freeze for a breath. She tried to straighten up. Mr. Harrison, do you have a moment? He asked. Deborah took that as her cue and slipped away. Michael gestured to the small glass conference room tucked behind a pillar. Catherine followed him. Inside, the walls muffled the ambient hum of the office. It was bright and warm, the way expensive spaces always were, polished yet untouched. Michael leaned against the table, setting his coffee down. I wanted to make sure your first day wasn't too disorienting. Catherine let out a nervous laugh. Other than being treated like a unicorn at a dog show, not too bad. His mouth twitched. You're handling it better than most. She hesitated. I'm still not sure why I'm here. Really? He looked at her, not dismissively, but as if he were measuring what she wasn't saying. Because you're talented, he said finally, and because you didn't pretend to be someone else. A long pause. And Sophie, he added, she reminded me that some things matter more than numbers on a screen. Catherine's breath hitched. She's just herself. She doesn't know how not to be. That's what makes her remarkable, he said softly. There was something in his voice, fragile, almost a crack between the sentences. He caught it and cleared his throat, shifting gears. I'd like you to join a planning session this afternoon. We're developing a concept for our annual foundation gala. It's going to be our biggest event in 5 years. Catherine blinked. I haven't even logged into my computer. Then you'll bring fresh eyes. He straightened, his presence suddenly composed again. The meeting is at 3. Deborah will brief you on the details. She nodded. Of course. Thank you. As he moved toward the door, he paused just long enough to say without turning, and Catherine, your daughter didn't ruin your interview. She saved it. He was gone before she could reply. Catherine stood in the ensuing silence, unsure if her heart was fluttering from his words or from how easily he seemed to unravel her. By 3 o'clock, she had memorized everyone's name in the staff directory and read every file Deborah handed her. She took notes, not because she was told to, but because the faster she found her footing here, the safer she would feel. The planning session was held in a long, glass-walled boardroom overlooking the street below. Michael sat at the head of the table. Caroline Harrison, his sister and CFO, sat opposite him, flipping through a binder as if she were slicing paper with every turn. Catherine slid into the last seat. Caroline looked up. You're the new hire. Catherine nodded, trying not to wither. Catherine Bennett, design. Caroline studied her with open skepticism. Right, the one with the unusual interview process. Michael didn't look up. Caroline, I'm just saying, she continued, turning another page. We've spent years building a reputation for discretion. Now we're embracing curbside surprises. Catherine opened her mouth, but Michael held up his hand. She's here. That's all that matters. Caroline's gaze lingered for another moment, then dropped. The rest of the meeting was a blur of project timelines, donor targets, venue constraints. Catherine sat quietly, absorbing it all. Then someone said, we need a theme, something emotional but not over the top. Caroline snorted. We're not going to pander to sympathy. And Catherine, without meaning to, spoke. What if it's not about sympathy, she said. What if it's about renewal? About what happens when someone gives you a second chance and you didn't even know you needed one? The room went quiet. Caroline raised an eyebrow. Do you have a visual to support that? Catherine hesitated, then pulled her notebook from her bag. She opened it to a sketch Sophie had drawn that morning. 3 stick figures standing under a tree, one holding a heart, one holding hands, and one smiling at the sun. This isn't professional, she admitted, holding it up, but it's honest. Michael looked at the drawing. His jaw tightened slightly, then relaxed. We'll use it. he said. Caroline blinked. You can't be serious. I'm very serious, Michael replied. It stays. Catherine didn't know what surprised her more, the decision or how final it sounded. After the meeting, as the room emptied, Caroline stayed behind. She approached Catherine slowly, arms crossed. I've seen people like you before, she said, her voice low. You come in all quiet and bright-eyed, but this place, it eats people who mistake kindness for leverage. Catherine met her gaze steadily. I'm not here to climb ladders. I just want to do work that means something. Caroline tilted her head. Then watch where you step. Meaningful work doesn't guarantee safe ground. She walked out, her heels clicking like punctuation. Catherine stood there holding Sophie's sketch, her hands a little steadier than they had been that morning. Not safe, but maybe something better, real. The rain started as a whisper against the windows. Catherine sat at her desk the next morning, watching water droplets trace paths down the glass. The Miami skyline was blurred behind the mist, as if the city had taken a soft breath and slowed down. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, but the blinking cursor mocked her silence. She wasn't blocked, she just couldn't get her mind off the way Michael had looked at Sophie's drawing. Not just approval, not even admiration, recognition. It stayed behind her eyes. The kind of recognition that didn't come from the drawing itself, but from what it stirred in him. She had seen it before, in grieving parents at school fundraisers, in her own face in the mirror some mornings. That ache of something lost, something too fragile to name. A voice broke her focus. Coffee. She turned. Michael was standing just outside the open glass wall of her workspace, holding 2 mugs. Catherine blinked. For me? He shrugged, then walked in without waiting for permission. It's either this or the espresso machine that sounds like a jet engine. She smiled, accepting the mug. Thank you. I didn't peg you as the bring coffee to employees type. I'm not, he said, settling into the empty chair across from her. But you're not exactly a typical employee. She laughed quietly. That sounds like both a compliment and a warning. Maybe it is both. A quiet moment passed. The rain thickened. Catherine took a sip, buying time. She could feel the weight of his gaze. It wasn't heavy, but it was direct, as if he wasn't afraid of what he might find if he looked too long. You saw something in that drawing, she said softly. He didn't answer right away. Sophie reminds me of someone, he said finally, his voice dropping an octave. Ellie, my wife. She was light in a world full of static, the kind of person who made you feel like everything could still turn out all right. Catherine watched the way he wrapped his fingers around the mug, not tight, but careful, as if he were afraid of breaking something invisible. I didn't know you were married, she said gently. I'm not, he replied. Not anymore. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was respectful and full. I'm sorry, she whispered. I was too, he murmured, for a long time. Catherine looked down at her hands. You don't have to talk about it. I want to, he said, and then surprised himself by adding, with you. She looked up. Their eyes met, not with fireworks, not yet, but with the kind of stillness that precedes something important, something irreversible. Before either of them could speak again, Deborah appeared in the doorway. Sorry to interrupt, she said, glancing between them with a little too much curiosity. Mr. Harrison, the PR team is waiting in the 4th floor conference room. Michael stood, his composure sliding back into place like a well-worn coat. Of course, thanks for the company. He walked out without a backward glance. Deborah lingered. You've made quite an impression, she said almost casually. Catherine didn't respond. You should be careful, Deborah added, her voice lower now. People talk, especially when something looks like more than it is. Catherine exhaled slowly, her coffee now cold in her hand. Let them talk. I've been through worse than whispers. That evening, when Catherine picked Sophie up from school, the rain had stopped. The sky broke open with golden light, and Sophie skipped beside her, chattering about art class and lunch trades. Mom, she asked, is Mr. Sadman really your boss? Catherine laughed, unlocking the car door. Yes, though you should probably stop calling him that. But he doesn't get sad around you, Sophie said, buckling herself in. I think he likes you. Catherine froze mid-motion. Sophie, He smiled at you yesterday. A real smile, like the kind you do when you draw something perfect. Catherine looked at her daughter, heart pounding. Grown-ups see things differently than kids do, she said gently. Sophie wrinkled her nose. No, they just pretend not to. I don't know why grown-ups do that. Back at home, Catherine reheated leftovers while Sophie painted at the kitchen table. The room smelled like garlic and crayon wax. Warmth clung to the walls. Catherine looked at her daughter's latest creation. 3 figures stood under a giant orange sun, one tall with silver hair, one with a bun, one with bright yellow curls. They were holding hands. She blinked at it, unsure whether to laugh or cry. The next morning, Catherine arrived at work to find a note on her desk. Lunch at 12:30. My office. No portfolios, just talk. M. She stared at it, her pulse racing. At 12:27, she knocked on his office door, her hands cold despite the heat. Michael opened the door himself. No tie today, she said, teasing lightly. He glanced down at his open collar. I only wear it when I need armor. And today, I wanted to breathe. She stepped inside. A small table had been set up near the window, complete with 2 plates of roasted chicken, vegetables, and iced tea. It wasn't catered. It wasn't delivery. You cooked? She asked, raising an eyebrow. I supervised, he said. Melissa in culinary owes me a favor. They sat, and for a moment neither spoke. The river stretched out beyond the window, calm and wide. I was nervous to see you again, Catherine admitted. Why? Because the last time we talked, it felt like something shifted, and I wasn't ready for it to mean something. Michael nodded slowly. I haven't let anyone in for a very long time, Catherine. She smiled sadly. Yeah, I kind of gathered that. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table. You make me want to remember how. Her breath caught, and her mind quickly went back to Caroline's warning, to Deborah's caution, to Sophie's sketches. It can't just be about Sophie, she whispered. It's not, he said. But she was the one who opened the door. A long pause. Let's not rush this, Catherine said finally, her voice soft. I've lived too much life to dive into anything blindly. Michael raised his glass of iced tea. Then here's to walking slowly. They clinked their glasses gently, and for the first time in years, Catherine didn't feel like she was surviving her day. She felt like she was stepping into it. It started with an email no one expected. Subject, bring your child to work day, Harrison style. From Michael Harrison to all staff. Body, tomorrow. Employees are encouraged to bring their children to the office. Our creativity is better when we see the world through younger eyes. Looking forward to the laughter and the crayons. Catherine read it twice, then a third time. She wasn't sure what surprised her more, that Michael had personally sent the message to the entire company, or that it was his idea to begin with. At first, she thought it was a subtle joke. But when she walked through the glass doors of the office the next morning, the building was buzzing with a strange, unfamiliar energy. Small sneakers squeaked across the marble floor. Laughter floated from the design department. Crayons rolled across desks where spreadsheets once reigned. Children were coloring on whiteboards, giggling in swivel chairs, eating bagels like royalty. And then came the moment that made her heart stop. Sophie's voice. Mr. Sadman, you came. Catherine turned to see her daughter running down the hall, curls bouncing, backpack swinging, and Michael Harrison, CEO, button-down shirt, no tie, smiling, a real smile. Sophie collided with him with the full force of joy, hugging his waist before she remembered to ask, was that okay? Michael placed a hand gently on her back and nodded. I was waiting for you. Catherine's breath hitched, not just because of what he said, but the way he said it, warm like family. The rest of the day moved at a chaotic golden pace. Someone from marketing had given Sophie a blank name tag and let her design her own. It now read, Creative Director, unofficial, in glitter pen. She sat next to Catherine at her workstation, coloring intensely while offering unsolicited but surprisingly insightful opinions on color palettes. I think the blue looks too sad, she whispered once, leaning close to Catherine's monitor. Try yellow. It looks like hope. Michael walked by at that moment and laughed. She's not wrong. In the mid-afternoon, Deborah brought cookies. The finance department had adopted a set of twins who were now the unofficial morale officers. A developer had set up a Lego corner, and yet, amid the controlled chaos, Catherine found herself watching Michael more than once. Not because he commanded the room's attention, because he didn't. He moved through the building like someone who had finally found his footing again, interacting, listening, laughing once outright when a 5-year-old asked if he was the boss of the candy too. But every time his eyes met Catherine's, something else flickered, soft, steady, intentional. Around 3, Maya showed up unannounced, wearing paint-splattered jeans and holding a coffee the size of her face. "You weren't going to tell me," she said, eyebrows raised. "Bring your child to work day, and Michael Harrison suddenly turns human." Catherine laughed, pulling her aside. "I didn't know until yesterday. He sent the email personally." Maya looked across the room to where Sophie was now giving Michael a drawing titled "Our Team." It featured him, Catherine, and Sophie all holding hands under a giant rainbow. "Oh, heck," Maya muttered. "You're in trouble." Catherine frowned. "Why?" "Because that man isn't just being nice, Catherine. He's choosing you." Catherine crossed her arms, suddenly defensive. "He's being kind to Sophie." Maya tilted her head. "No, he's looking at you like you're the first quiet breath he's taken in years." Before Catherine could answer, Deborah appeared behind them. "Ms. Torres, I don't believe we've met." Maya straightened. "Maya, I'm Catherine's friend, artist, gallery owner, occasional truth deliverer." Deborah offered a polite but tight smile. "A pleasure. Just be careful. This isn't a place for personal complications." Maya blinked, then gave a small, pointed smile. "Then you might want to warn your CEO. He's 3 crayons away from building a pillow fort with her daughter." Deborah didn't reply. She just nodded and walked away. Catherine exhaled slowly, watching her go. "She doesn't like me," she murmured. Maya grinned. "Jealousy comes in blazes." Later that evening, as the office quieted and parents gathered their children, Catherine stayed behind to clear Sophie's desk. She found one more drawing tucked under a notepad, a house with a porch, a swing, a garden. The same 3 stick figures were smiling out front. She blinked at it, her chest tight. "She has a gift," Michael said from behind her. She turned to find him standing a few feet away. No clipboard, no distractions, just him. "She doesn't draw what she sees," he added. "She draws what she wants to be true." Catherine nodded slowly, still holding the figure. "It scares me sometimes how much she sees." He stepped closer, his voice quiet. "She sees what matters, and she's not afraid to name it." Catherine put the drawing down and met his eyes. "Neither are you, not anymore." The silence between them grew, unspoken things hanging in the air. And then Michael said, "Come to Daytona Beach this weekend, just for the day. There's a beach house I haven't opened in a while. Sophie could see the beach. You could breathe." Catherine hesitated. "That's a big invitation." "I know," he said, "but I think it's time to stop being afraid of what feels good." She swallowed, her pulse racing. "Let me think about it," she said. Michael nodded once. "I'll be there." Her door open, porch light on. He walked away, hands in his pockets, leaving her alone in the soft hum of the empty office. Catherine stood for a long moment, her heart loud in the stillness. She looked at Sophie's drawing again. The house, the swing, the family. And for the first time since she'd taken the job, Catherine wondered if her daughter's pictures were more than just wishful thinking. Maybe they were instructions. Maybe they were maps. Daytona Beach greeted them with a breeze that smelled of sea salt and sun-warmed sand. Catherine stepped out of the car, holding Sophie's hand, and let the quietness envelop them. It was the kind of quiet that felt earned, as if the world had paused just long enough for her to hear her own breath. Michael stood on the wide porch of the weathered, cedar-shingled cottage, sleeves rolled up, his hair messy from the wind. He wasn't wearing his usual suit, just a light linen shirt and khaki pants, more human, less untouchable. "Whoa," Sophie whispered, her eyes wide as she took in the ocean beyond the dunes. "Is this a real beach house or one of those fake ones on TV?" Michael smiled. "It's real, I promise." The porch creaked softly as they walked up. Michael stepped aside and held the door open. Welcome. Inside, the space was warm and lived in, not polished like the office or Michael's penthouse. Books filled the built-in shelves. The scent of lemon wax hung in the air. An old record player sat in the corner, and sunlight poured through gauze curtains that swayed in time with the breeze. "This doesn't look like you," Catherine said, running her fingers along a shelf filled with dog-eared novels and family cookbooks. Michael's smile faded into something softer. "It looks like who I used to be." He led them to the sunroom at the back of the house where a long table had been cleared. Art supplies were arranged in neat rows: paints, sketch pads, watercolors. A folded note sat in the center, written in Michael's clean, careful script. "Sunshine, here's where you grow best. M." Sophie gasped. "This is for me?" "All yours," Michael said. "I figured an artist needs her own space." She dropped her bag and ran to the table, already unwrapping her box of pencils. Catherine watched her for a moment, overcome by the gesture, by the thoughtfulness, by the kindness that never seemed to come with strings attached. "You didn't have to do all this," she said, her voice low. "I know," Michael said, "but I wanted to." They stepped out onto the porch while Sophie painted, the screen door clicking softly behind them. The breeze rolled in from the sea, carrying distant sounds of gulls and children's laughter from somewhere down the beach. Catherine leaned against the railing. "You're full of surprises." Michael joined her, quiet for a long moment. "Want to know something strange?" She looked at him. "I haven't been here in years," he said. "Not since Ellie died." Catherine's breath hitched. "This place was supposed to be where we raised our family," he said, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Where summers were spent barefoot, where our child would learn to swim in that ocean. But after the accident, I locked it up, boarded the doors, couldn't breathe in here without feeling like I would drown." Catherine didn't speak. She let the silence hold the weight of his memory. He turned to her slowly. "And now here I am, watching your daughter paint at that table as if the house has been waiting for her all this time. She has that effect," Catherine said softly. "She walks into places and makes them feel like home." Michael's eyes met hers. "So do you." The air between them thickened, not tense, but electric. Catherine turned her face to the sea, her heart beating against her ribs. "I don't know what this is," she said quietly. "You and me, this thing." "I don't know either," Michael admitted. "But for the first time in a long time, I want to find out." She looked at him again, and the emotion in his gaze made her chest ache. There was no script for this moment, no polished line, just truth, raw and terrifying. "I'm scared," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've built so many walls for Sophie, for me, because it's easier to be alone than to risk someone not staying." "I'm not asking you to tear them down," Michael said. "Just leave the door open a little." Before she could answer, the screen door creaked. Sophie stood there, paint smudged on her cheek, holding a figure in both hands. "I made this," she announced proudly. "It's us." Catherine stepped forward and took it. 3 figures stood in front of a porch, one tall with silver hair, one with a bun, one small with her arms raised, the sun drawn as a swirl of yellow and orange above them. "I gave you a porch swing," Sophie said, "because porch swings mean you stay long enough to watch the stars." Catherine felt her throat tighten. Michael crouched down beside Sophie. "Can I keep this?" he asked. "Only if you promise not to bend it," she said seriously. "I'll frame it," he said. Sophie beamed. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned to lavender, Michael grilled vegetables while Catherine set the outdoor table. Sophie danced barefoot on the porch, humming to herself between bites of strawberry. It felt impossible, and yet, somehow, real. After dinner, Catherine stood alone at the shoreline, waves lapping at her feet. Michael joined her, hands in his pockets. "Do you remember what you said at the beginning?" Catherine asked quietly. Michael looked over. "I said a lot of things. You said that sometimes all it takes is a hug." He smiled, remembering. Catherine took his hand. "That hug didn't just change your life. It gave me one." The wind picked up slightly, brushing through the trees, rustling the leaves like pages turning. A new chapter had begun, not because of a job or a title or even a proposal, but because 2 broken people stopped trying to be perfect and started trying to be present. And in doing so, they gave each other the most radical kind of love, a place to start over, together. Monday came with the kind of sharp sunlight that didn't feel like a blessing. It pierced the windows of the Harrison Technologies office and ricocheted off glass desks, making everything look too clean, too clear. Catherine adjusted her blazer and stepped out of the elevator, Sophie's laughter from the weekend still echoing softly in her mind, her fingertips still remembering the warmth of Michael's hand. And yet, the moment the elevator doors slid shut behind her, the illusion of calm dissolved. Caroline Harrison was waiting, standing with her arms crossed outside Catherine's cubicle, her expression unreadable, her lips pressed into a near smile, tight, knowing, a little too practiced. "Catherine," she said smoothly, "back from your island getaway." Catherine kept her tone polite. "It was a beautiful weekend. Thank you." Caroline's eyebrow arched. "Oh, you don't have to thank me. I didn't approve the trip." Catherine paused. "It was on personal time." Caroline stepped forward just enough to close the gap. "You're rising awfully fast for someone who didn't even come in the front door." Catherine felt the words land, soft but sharp. "Are we having a conversation about protocol or something else?" Caroline's smile grew thinner. "Just a reminder that visibility comes with responsibility and consequences. This company has layers, Catherine, deep ones. It remembers who took the stairs and who took the express elevator to the top." Catherine swallowed, meeting her gaze. "I didn't ask for special treatment. I came here to work. That hasn't changed." Caroline leaned in slightly. "Just make sure it stays that way." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking with deliberate grace. Catherine exhaled and sat at her desk, her pulse racing. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, but her focus was scattered. There was no ignoring what that exchange meant. Caroline wasn't just suspicious. She was preparing. Around noon, Michael texted, "Can we meet in my office at 1? Just a quick check-in." She typed back, "Of course, looking forward to it." But by the time 1 o'clock arrived, the mood had shifted. Michael's door was closed. Deborah stood near the reception desk with a subtle frown. There was a stiffness in the air, one that hadn't been there before. Catherine knocked gently and stepped inside. Michael looked up from a file. His smile flickered but didn't quite land. "Hi," he said. "Hi," she replied, walking in slowly. "Are you okay?" He gestured to the chair across from him. "I wanted to talk before the board meeting." "There's been some chatter." Catherine sat, her pulse already rising. "Chatter about favoritism," Michael said quietly, "and blurred lines." She froze. "From Caroline?" Michael didn't confirm, but he didn't deny it either. "I just want to make sure you're protected," he continued. "This place, it notices everything. People talk when change happens too fast." Catherine leaned forward, her voice firm. "Did I cross a line?" "No," he said quickly. "Not with me. But perception isn't always tied to truth, and perception is everything in this world." She leaned back, her eyes locked on his. "So what now?" Michael hesitated, then spoke carefully. "We create space, just a little, publicly, to keep the waters calm." Catherine nodded slowly, the hurt seeping in, even as she understood the logic. "You mean act like we don't care when we do?" He exhaled. "It's not forever, just until the storm passes." She stood, her heart heavy. "Then I hope it passes quickly." She walked out without another word. Back at her desk, Sophie's drawing was tacked beside her monitor, a small reminder of a moment that now seemed miles away. Catherine tried to work, but her chest ached. Her thoughts refused to stay in order. She typed, deleted, retyped, stared at the blinking cursor as if it owed her an answer. Later that afternoon, Maya called. "I have an artist backing out of a gallery show next week," she said. "I need a replacement. I thought of you." Catherine blinked. "Me? You have pieces ready. They're raw, they're honest, the kind of emotional realism people lean into. Come on, Catherine, you used to breathe through your art." Catherine hesitated. "I don't know. With work. And Sophie. Bring Sophie. She can draw at the gallery. And you need this." Catherine stared at the empty design mock-up on her screen. "I'll think about it." "Don't think," Maya shot back. "Say yes before you talk yourself out of it." That evening, Catherine and Sophie sat on the living room floor, surrounded by scattered crayons and blank canvases. Catherine watched her daughter draw another family, this time inside a gallery space under track lights. "Mom?" Sophie asked, tilting her head. "Why don't you draw anymore?" Catherine swallowed. "I forgot how." Sophie reached out and placed a crayon in her hand. "Then I'll remind you." The next morning, Catherine arrived at the office with her decision already made. She texted Maya, "I'm in. Let's hang the paintings. Let's take up space." And maybe, just maybe, that space would be hers again. Not because of Michael, not because of an opportunity handed to her on a golden platter, but because she had built it with paint and courage, and the kind of love that doesn't fade just because people whisper behind closed doors. She didn't need everyone's approval. She just needed to remember who she was before the world told her not to be. The gallery smelled of fresh paint, floor wax, and quiet ambition. It was Thursday night, the final walkthrough before the opening. Catherine stood near the far wall, watching Maya adjust the lighting on the third piece in her collection. The gallery space was modest, white walls, high ceilings, natural wood flooring, but every corner held something raw and beautiful, something that felt like it mattered. Her paintings lined the east wall, 5 in total. Each one a piece of her grief, her hope, her motherhood, her survival, her joy in the middle of chaos. They weren't perfect, but they were honest. "I told you," Maya said, stepping back beside her. "They hold up. People are going to feel these." Catherine looked down at her hands, still smudged with charcoal from a last-minute touch-up. "I didn't think I had anything worth showing." Maya tapped her shoulder. "Turns out, you had a whole story trapped in you. And now, it's out where it belongs." Footsteps echoed from the back hall, and Catherine turned just in time to see Sophie appear with a lollipop in her mouth and a clipboard twice her size. "I did inventory," she declared, handing it to Maya. "We have 24 chairs, but one is wobbly." Maya saluted. "You're the only intern I trust with that kind of pressure." Sophie grinned and skipped over to a bench under a painting titled "Stillness After the Storm." It was the one piece Catherine had almost thrown away twice. Too vulnerable, too personal. She looked around the room, her pulse rising. Michael hadn't arrived. He hadn't called. He hadn't texted. She told herself not to read into it. He had meetings, deadlines, a company to run, and a sister in his ear. Still, she checked her phone again. Still nothing. At 7, the gallery began to buzz. Guests trickled in. Friends, locals, art students, curious passers-by, drawn in by the soft jazz spilling from the front doors. Maya floated between the guests like a conductor, greeting collectors, accepting compliments, directing attention to Catherine's work without ever making her the center of the room. Catherine didn't need to be the spotlight, but she needed him to see. At 7:23, the bell above the door chimed. She turned, her heart betraying her before her mind caught up. Michael. He stepped inside, dressed in navy trousers and a gray sport coat, put together calm, but his eyes scanned the room with a quiet urgency until they landed on her and softened. Catherine didn't move, neither did he. And then, like the world exhaled just a little, he made his way over to her. "I didn't think you were coming," she said, barely over the music. "I wasn't sure I should," he said. She searched his face. "Because of Caroline?" He hesitated. "Because I didn't want my presence to overshadow your light tonight." Catherine's throat tightened. "You think you have that kind of power?" "I think I've made some things harder than they needed to be." They stood there, words failing to reach across the silence between them. Finally, Michael looked past her to the painting behind her shoulder. "Stillness After the Storm." His expression shifted. "You painted this," he said, stepping closer. She nodded once. "Last year, after Sophie got sick, we were in and out of hospitals. I had no answers, just fear, and this came out of it." He looked at it for a long moment. The brushwork was chaotic at the edges, grays and deep greens colliding, but toward the center, the lines softened, the silhouette of a child curled in the arms of someone taller, light pouring from above them. "It's beautiful," he said, "but it hurts to look at." She exhaled. That's what it felt like to live. He turned back to her. And you still showed it to the world. She nodded, her eyes wet, because someone out there is living it right now. He reached for her hand, not dramatic, not performative, just a quiet, grounding gesture. "I'm sorry for the space I asked you to create," he said gently. "I thought I was protecting you, but I think I was just protecting myself." Catherine blinked slowly, words trembling on the edge of her voice. "Do you still want space?" "No," he said. "I want truth, even when it's messy." Sophie appeared at their side, holding a cup of lemonade and wearing a necklace made from twisted ribbon. She looked at Michael and smiled. "I told you Mommy's pictures would make people cry." Michael laughed, crouching down. "They made me cry too." Sophie handed him the ribbon necklace. "This is for being brave." He looked at Catherine, then back at Sophie. "Then I guess I'll wear it with pride." The three of them stood together for a moment that didn't feel like the middle of a party. It felt like home. Later that night, after the last guest had left and the lights were dimmed, Michael helped Catherine pack the unsold prints into boxes. Sophie had fallen asleep in the corner, curled up under Maya's oversized coat. "You're incredible," Michael said suddenly, turning to her. "I don't say that enough." Catherine shook her head, brushing hair from her face. "I'm not. I'm just trying to keep the pieces from falling." He stepped closer. "Then maybe we pick them up together." She looked up at him. "It's not easy, and it's not going to be neat." "I don't need neat," he said softly. "I need real." Catherine paused, let his words settle, let the room go quiet. Then she leaned in and rested her forehead gently against his. They didn't kiss, not yet, but something deeper happened. They stayed. The morning after the gallery show, the world felt softer, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Catherine stood barefoot in her kitchen, the floor cool beneath her feet, a mug of coffee warming her hands. Through the window, the morning sunlight spilled across the porch and touched the edge of Sophie's chalk drawings on the steps. She played Michael's voice in her head over and over. "Then maybe we pick the pieces up together." It wasn't a promise, but it was something. "Mom," Sophie called solemnly from the hallway, her curls a tangled crown of dreams. "Did we get famous?" Catherine laughed, setting her mug down. "Almost. You were the star of the night." Sophie yawned, shuffling over and leaning against her side. "Did Mr. Michael like your paintings?" "I think he saw them in a way no one else ever has." Sophie looked up at her. "Are you going to marry him?" Catherine blinked mid-sip. "Whoa, kid, where did that come from?" Sophie shrugged. "You smiled different when he held your hand. It looked like when people find something they lost." Catherine crouched down, brushing Sophie's hair away from her face. "He's special, but sometimes grown-ups go slow. We're still figuring it out. But he makes you less tired," Sophie said simply. "That matters." Before Catherine could answer, her phone buzzed on the counter, a text from Deborah. "Board meeting moved to this afternoon. Your presence requested. Bring updated visuals." D. Catherine stared at the screen for a moment, then sighed. "Duty calls," she whispered. Back at Harrison Technologies, the mood had shifted again. There was an undercurrent in the building now. Whispers in break rooms, long glances during elevator rides. Catherine could feel the subtle shift in temperature every time she entered a room, as if someone had turned the dimmer down just slightly on the warmth. When she walked into the glass-walled conference room, Caroline was already seated at the far end of the table, a tablet in front of her, her eyes cold and unreadable. "Catherine," she said, her voice perfectly polite, "so glad you could join us." Michael wasn't there yet. Catherine took her seat opposite her, nodding respectfully. Within minutes, the room began to fill. Directors, analysts, investors, the kind of people who spoke in spreadsheets and read emotion like an error code. Finally, Michael walked in, calm and composed. He offered Catherine a brief look. No smile, no flicker, but just enough acknowledgement to tell her, "Hold steady." The meeting opened with quarterly reports, projections, and a painfully slow walkthrough of campaign performance. Catherine presented her slides with clarity, even as Caroline interrupted twice with clarifying questions that weren't really questions, just veiled jabs. By the time the meeting was over, Catherine felt emotionally drained, her back damp with tension. She was packing up her laptop when she overheard a quiet exchange between Caroline and one of the board members. "She's talented, yes, but let's not forget where she started. We can't build a legacy brand on charity cases." Catherine froze. The words weren't loud. They weren't meant for her, but they landed like shattering glass on her chest. She walked out without saying goodbye. Outside, the air was too thick. Her hands shook as she pressed the elevator button. The polished world around her, so pristine, so glass and gold, suddenly felt fragile, fake. The elevator opened, and Michael was inside, alone. He stepped back, letting her in. The doors slid shut, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then he said softly, "I heard." Catherine shook her head. "It doesn't matter. I'm not here to be liked. But you deserve to be respected." She looked up at him. "I thought I could handle this, the whispers, the expectations, the pressure. But today I felt like someone's charity case, not a contributor." Michael's voice was low, firm. "They're wrong. And if I've done anything to make that harder—" "You haven't," she cut in. "You gave me a door, I walked through it. But now I need to know I'm not just a stand-in." The elevator stopped at the terrace floor, an access only a few had. Michael touched her arm. "Come with me." She followed him through the security door to the rooftop garden where Miami stretched out in every direction, bathed in gold. "I come up here when the world feels too loud," Michael said. "It reminds me that everything looks different from a few stories higher." Catherine walked to the edge, letting the wind pull at her blazer. "I've spent so much of my life just trying to survive," she said. "And I'm tired of surviving. I want to live, really live. But I'm not going to do it by pretending I belong in spaces that only tolerate me." Michael stood beside her. "Then let's make a new space." She turned to him, her heart open, raw. "Are you willing to build it with me? Not just for show, not just behind closed doors, but for real?" He nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "I am, but only if you're standing beside me, not behind." A long silence settled between them, and then, without ceremony or hesitation, Catherine stepped forward and kissed him. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't rushed, it was real, it was earned. When they broke apart, Michael smiled. "That was definitely not a board-approved move." Catherine laughed breathlessly. "I don't care." Neither did he. And for the first time in a long time, neither of them looked away. The morning light crept into Catherine's bedroom like a whisper, soft and golden across the hardwood floors. Sophie was still asleep in the next room, curled in her blanket like a little burrito. And for the first time, the apartment was quiet. Quiet in a way that made Catherine pause in the doorway and just breathe. Her phone buzzed next to the kettle. A text from Michael. "Good morning. Just checking in. Thought about you all night. Don't let them dim you. M." Catherine stared at the screen, her thumb hovering. Then she typed back, "You make it easier to stand tall. Let's talk tonight." She sent it before her nerves could catch up. When she arrived at the office, the air had shifted again, tense, but quiet, as if everyone had agreed to speak an octave lower. Caroline wasn't at her desk, but Deborah found her in the elevator. "She's in a mood," Deborah whispered. "Something about a vote getting pushed through without her signature. I'd avoid eye contact." Catherine raised an eyebrow. "Noted." On her desk, there was a sealed envelope. No name, just her initials in slanted ink. KB inside was a letter, typed, anonymous. "You were a pity hire. Everyone knows it. You're just a pretty distraction in a suit someone else paid for." There was no signature, no name, just poison. She folded it slowly, slid it into her drawer and leaned back. Her first instinct was to cry. Her second was to run. But her third, stronger than both, was to rise. Instead of retreating into silence, she emailed Maya. "Emergency lunch. Now. You pick." Maya replied in 30 seconds. "On my way. Don't bring your sad face. I'm too hungry to deal with feelings without fries." They met at a diner near Bayfront Park, the kind with red vinyl booths, greasy menus, and waitresses who called everyone honey. Maya slid into the booth, took one look at Catherine, and ordered 2 chocolate milkshakes without asking. "I know that look," she said. "Let her." Catherine nodded. Maya leaned in. "Listen to me. People only throw stones at glass that shines. You're not the problem, Catherine. You're the mirror they can't stand to look in." Catherine stared at her. "That's poetic for someone who just ordered chili cheese fries." "I'm complicated." They laughed, but it cracked in the middle. Catherine's shoulders slumped. "I didn't come here to be someone's scandal," she admitted. "I came because I needed a job. I stayed because somewhere along the way, it started to feel like I was building something that mattered." "You are. Then why does every gust of wind feel like a weapon someone's going to use against me?" Maya reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Because you're rising in a place that was never built to carry women like us. But you're still rising. That's the win." Catherine didn't speak. She just let the milkshake cool her fingers, her throat, her fire. That night, she and Michael met at the Daytona beach house. Sophie was with a friend's family for a sleepover, and the house was quiet in a way that made everything feel more exposed. Michael greeted her at the door with a simple, "Hi." Catherine stepped inside and wrapped her arms around him. Not desperate, just needing the gravity. "Hi," he whispered against her hair. They sat near the fireplace, even though it was late spring and not cold. The glow felt good, human. Catherine told him about the letter, about Caroline, about the elevator ride that changed nothing and everything. Michael didn't interrupt. He didn't offer polished lines or company-approved excuses. He just listened. Then, when the words ran out, he leaned close. "I need to tell you something," he said. "And it's not easy." Catherine stilled. He took a deep breath. "Caroline isn't just a director. She's the largest private shareholder outside of me. Her vote carries weight, her voice more than it should, and she's made it clear she sees you as a threat." Catherine blinked. "I don't want her chair. I just want my own." "I know, but she's not interested in facts. She's interested in control." The fire crackled between them. "I've been protecting you quietly," Michael continued. "Moving projects, shielding press leaks, smoothing over whispers, but it's not enough anymore. At the next board meeting, they're going to push for a vote, not just about you, about me, about the direction of the company." Catherine's throat tightened. "Do you think they'll ask you to step down?" "I think Caroline is betting on fear, and she's using you to light the match." Catherine stood abruptly, pacing. "This is what I was afraid of," she said, her voice trembling, "being the thing someone points to when they want to tear something bigger down." Michael stood too. "You're not a thing. You're a person I care about deeply, and I'm not going to apologize for that." She turned to him. "But what if it ruins everything you've built?" Michael stepped forward. "Then maybe it wasn't built strong enough to begin with." They looked at each other, two people on the edge of something fragile, something real. Finally, Catherine spoke. "Then we build something new, but not in secret, not in silence." Michael nodded, his heart in his eyes. "Together. Together," she whispered. And when they kissed this time, it wasn't cautious. It was a choice. Sunday came with a rainstorm. Not a loud one, just steady, soft rain washing over Miami, as if the city were being gently wrung out. Catherine sat on the front porch of the beach house, a blanket draped over her shoulders, hot tea cooling beside her. Sophie was inside, humming as she colored, the scent of blueberry waffles still drifting through the air. The quietness felt different now, charged, as if something was shifting underneath. Michael was due to arrive any minute, not for a date, not for a stolen moment, for a conversation that could no longer wait. Catherine heard his car pull up before she saw it, the crunch of tires on gravel, a door closing softly, his careful footsteps on the wet stone steps. When he reached the porch, his eyes searched for hers immediately. "Hi," he said, rain glistening on the shoulders of his coat. She opened the screen door. "Come in before you catch a cold." He followed her into the warm beach house, his eyes roaming around. Sophie peeked out from her drawing and waved. "Hi, Mr. Michael." "Hi, sweetie," he smiled, crouching to her eye level. "Are you making another masterpiece?" "I'm designing a castle," she said matter-of-factly, "with secret tunnels and a breakfast room for just pancakes." Michael looked impressed. "Sounds like a castle I'd want to live in." Sophie tilted her head. "Do you like my mom?" There was no hesitation. "I do," he said. "Very much." "Good," Sophie said with a nod. "She likes you too. I can tell. She hums more." Catherine laughed softly, stepping in to rescue him. "All right, little matchmaker. Give us a minute." Sophie gave a dramatic sigh, then retreated to her room. The moment the door closed, Catherine's smile faded. "Let's sit," she said, gesturing to the small sofa near the window. They settled near each other, but not quite touching. She began, "Michael, I need to understand what we're walking into. Not just emotionally, professionally, real-world consequences." He nodded. "Caroline isn't going to back down. She's already meeting privately with several board members. She's trying to push you out. She's trying to reshape the company in her image, and in her world, there's no room for risk. There's no room for love that doesn't come in a proper package." Catherine looked down at her hands. "So what happens if she wins?" He hesitated, then answered cleanly. "I walk." Catherine's eyes shot up to his. "What?" "I built Harrison Technologies to solve problems, not to create cages. If staying means betraying what matters most to me, then it's not worth keeping." Her chest tightened. "Michael, I didn't come into your life to make you lose everything." He shook his head. "You didn't make me lose anything. You reminded me of what's real, what's human. That isn't a loss. It's the first time in years I've actually felt alive." She reached for his hand. "You're talking about giving up power, Legacy. I'm talking about winning back peace," he said gently. A roll of thunder sounded outside. Sophie's soft humming floated from down the hall like a lullaby. Catherine closed her eyes for a long moment, the weight of it all settling. "I believe you," she said finally, "but I won't let you burn your house down for me." Michael leaned closer, his eyes steady. "Then let's rebuild something better together," she smiled, her eyes wet. "You keep saying that, because it's true." Later that night, Maya arrived with paint swatches, snacks, and a binder full of sketches. "We need to talk about the gallery again," she said, spreading plans across the kitchen table. "The buzz after your show hasn't died down. People want more, including a collector from Charleston." Catherine blinked. "A collector?" Maya nodded. "He's offering $5,000 for Stillness After the Storm." Catherine nearly dropped her mug. "That piece was therapy. It wasn't for sale." "Exactly," Maya said. "That's why he wants it. Because it's real." Catherine looked over at Michael, who was standing in the doorway, watching silently. "Take it," he said. "You gave the world something honest. Now let the world give it back." She smiled slowly. "I don't know what's happening. Everything feels bigger than me." Michael stepped forward. "Maybe that's what healing looks like, a life that keeps expanding." As the rain subsided outside, Sophie came skipping into the room, holding up her finished drawing. "This is for both of you," she said, holding it up. Two figures under an umbrella, holding hands, smiling, and in the center of the page, in her small script, she had written, "My family." Catherine knelt beside her daughter, her voice thick. "It's beautiful, baby." Michael knelt too, running a finger over the crayon strokes. "I think it's perfect." Maya wiped her eyes. "I'm not crying, you're crying." They all laughed, but it was soft, tender, the kind of laughter that comes when something cracks open gently and lets the light in. The next few days would bring more battles, more meetings, more tension, but in that moment, in that warm little cottage, with the rain fading to mist, Catherine knew something for sure. She wasn't fighting alone. And for the first time in years, the future didn't scare her. It invited her. The boardroom felt colder than usual. Catherine sat at the far end of the long walnut table, her palms flat against the binder in front of her, mock-ups of a new campaign she had worked on with Michael over the weekend. Her heart beat under her ribs like distant thunder. She had dressed carefully that morning, not for attention, for armor. To her right, Deborah gave her a small, supportive nod. Maya had offered to come sit outside the room just in case, but Catherine had said no. This was hers to face. Michael was running late, and Caroline knew it. She sat at the head of the table, pristine as ever. Perfect hair, white silk blouse, pearl earrings that caught the light with every turn of her head. Her expression was composed, But her eyes were sharp. The room fell into a low murmur until the door opened. Michael walked in, calm but unreadable, carrying only his phone and a pen. He didn't look at Catherine, not yet, but his energy filled the space as if gravity had shifted. "Let's begin," Caroline said crisply. "We'll open with item number 1, adjustments to the executive structure. I've circulated a motion for the board's consideration." Catherine stiffened. This was it. No preamble, no discussion. Caroline had gone straight for the jugular. "I move," she continued, "that the board begin the process of selecting a new strategy director and establish clearer boundaries between personal affiliations and professional appointments going forward." The words cut through the air. Michael didn't flinch. He leaned forward, lacing his fingers together. "I'd like to speak before this goes to a vote." Caroline gave a cool smile. "Of course." Michael stood, scanning the faces around the table, mostly older, some skeptical, some sympathetic. Catherine could feel them watching her too, assessing, wondering, waiting for a sign of weakness. "When I built this company," Michael began, "I was young, ruthless, and maybe a little reckless. But I had a purpose: to solve real problems, to make people's lives easier, not just more profitable. Along the way, I lost some of that. I started measuring value by how clean the spreadsheets looked, how smooth the headlines read." And then he finally looked at Catherine. "Someone reminded me of what people are really made of what this place should be made of." A hush fell over the room. "She came in the back door," he continued, "not because she lacked merit, but because the front door was sealed to women like her, single mothers, artists, survivors. She earned her place 10 times over, but still, she was made to feel like an intruder in a house she helped furnish." Caroline spoke then, her voice flat. "Michael, no one is disputing Ms. Bennett's talent. This is about fear," he cut in, "and control, and I will not sit by while the best voice we've had in years is silenced under the guise of structure." Caroline's eyes narrowed. "You're letting your emotions drive your decisions." "No," Michael said, "I'm letting my values do it, and I'm done pretending those two things can't coexist." He turned to the rest of the board. "I'm not stepping down, but I'm changing how we move forward. We either become a place that values truth, resilience, and real innovation, or we become another glass tower with frosted windows and empty hearts. I know where I stand. The question is, do you?" The silence that followed was thick with tension. Some board members whispered among themselves. An older man cleared his throat. "I think it's time we evolved," he said quietly. "If the future of the company looks like her," he nodded at Catherine, "then I'm willing to bet on it." Others followed hesitantly at first, but with growing confidence. When the final vote was cast, the restructuring motion failed. Catherine felt her lungs finally expand. Caroline's face remained composed, but her fingers tightened around her pen. The meeting ended with awkward congratulations, scattered nods, and the subtle unraveling of something long wound up. As the room emptied, Michael walked over to Catherine quietly. "Are you okay?" She gave a shaky laugh. "No, but I'm standing." "That counts for something." He touched her hand briefly. "You didn't just stand, you changed the room." Outside, the sky had cleared. The rain washed clean from the sidewalks. Catherine and Michael walked side by side down the stone steps, the building rising behind them. "What now?" she asked. He looked at her, his expression softening. "Now we build with intention, with people who know how to fight beautifully." She smiled. Back at the beach house that night, Sophie had drawn another figure. This one showed a tall building with a rainbow above it. In the center was a tiny figure in a bright yellow dress and a crown made of stars. "Who's that?" Catherine asked. Sophie smiled. "You at work, because you're the queen now." Catherine kissed her forehead, holding back tears, not because the fight was over, but because it had finally been worth it. The next few weeks passed in a blur of quiet victories. Catherine found herself in meetings where her voice wasn't just heard, it was sought. Projects she had helped shape were now being held up as benchmarks. Even Deborah, who had once kept her distance, started bringing coffee to her desk with small smiles and phrases like, "You've got them paying attention, Kay." But the most unexpected shift wasn't at the office. It was at home. Sophie had started drawing stories, entire pages of characters, castles, and worlds stitched together in swirls of crayon. Catherine saved them all. She taped them above the kitchen sink, along the hallway, inside her planner. They were reminders that growth didn't have to be loud. Sometimes it bloomed quietly in the corners. One Friday evening, Michael invited her to the beach house again. Not for a meeting, not for another serious talk, but for dinner. Just the two of them. Catherine stood in front of her closet for a full 15 minutes. She wasn't trying to impress him, at least that's what she told herself. But deep down, she knew this wasn't just dinner. It was a step forward, maybe the real one. When she arrived, the lights inside the house glowed soft and warm. Candlelight flickered from the windows. The door opened before she even knocked. Michael stood there, sleeves rolled up, a flour-dusted apron tied at his waist. She burst into laughter. "I thought you were going to order takeout." "I considered it," he said, stepping back to let her in. "But then I remembered what you said the first time we met." She tilted her head. "Which was?" "That you didn't trust people who couldn't cook a decent meal without a microwave." She smiled. "That sounds like me." I took it personally. The kitchen smelled of rosemary, garlic, and something rich and earthy baking in the oven. A small table had been pulled near the fireplace, 2 places already set, and soft jazz played from a speaker tucked on a shelf. "You did all this?" she asked, touched. He shrugged. "I've been trying to learn what peace looks like. Turns out it looks like setting a table with your own hands." They ate slowly, sharing stories between bites. Catherine told him about the time Sophie tried to mail herself to Disney World in a cardboard box. Michael confessed that he once faked an allergy to get out of a networking gala and ended up in the emergency room after eating the very thing he'd claimed to be allergic to. They laughed more that night than they had in weeks. After dinner, they moved to the couch, a fire crackling low behind them. Catherine curled her legs under her, her fingers wrapped around a wine glass. Michael leaned back, his eyes steady on hers. "I keep thinking about that first day when I showed up looking like a drowned cat." He smiled. "When you walked into that room like you already owned it, even though I could tell you weren't sure you belonged." Catherine looked down. "I wasn't sure." "I was." She looked up at him. "I didn't know what it meant back then," he said quietly. "But something shifted. You didn't just challenge the room. You changed it. And now I can't imagine walking through a single door without wondering if you should be on the other side." Catherine's breath caught. "You're not just important to the company," he continued. "You're important to me. And I know we've built this slowly, carefully. But Catherine, I'm ready for what's next with you, with Sophie, with all of it." She swallowed. "Michael, I'm not asking you to rush, but I needed you to know where I stand." Catherine set her glass down, reached for his hand. "I'm not afraid of the next chapter," she said, "but I need to write it in a way that feels like me. No headlines, no whispers behind boardroom doors, just us, real, unfiltered." Michael nodded. "Then let's do that. No pressure, no plans, just 1 page at a time." They sat like that in the quiet comfort of understanding for a long time. Later, as she stood to leave, he walked her to the door. She paused in the threshold, her fingers resting on the frame. "I'm not used to someone showing up for me like this," she admitted. "I'm still learning how to let it in." "You're doing great," he said, "and I'm not going anywhere." Catherine stepped out into the night air, the scent of salt and earth lingering. She turned back one last time. "I believe you," he smiled. "Good, because I believe in you." She walked down the path toward her car, stars beginning to flicker awake above the treetops. The world finally feeling like it was hers to move through, not hide from, and somewhere deep inside, something unlocked. Not everything had to be fought for. Some things, like love, like healing, could be welcomed. The Miami spring air had begun to soften, hanging heavy with the scent of magnolia and wet earth. Catherine stood outside the gallery with Maya, looking at the new sign they had just finished hanging. Bennett & Co., Stories in colour. The windows were filled with Catherine's paintings and Sophie's crayon drawings, tacked beside them like little notes from the soul. It wasn't just an art gallery. It was a memory stitched into a building. Maya nudged her with her elbow. Still feels like a dream. Catherine nodded slowly. A good one, but I keep waiting to wake up. You're not dreaming, Maya said, her eyes sweeping the storefront proudly. You're building, and it's beautiful. The grand opening was days away, but the press had already started to buzz. A local paper ran a feature titled "Single Mom Turns Art into Anthem, an Unlikely Story of Grace." Michael had sent over 3 copies with a post-it note. One for Sophie's scrapbook, one for your wall, one for the boardroom. He had been steady since that night at the beach house. Not grand or showy, just present. Always calling, always asking questions that made her feel seen, not studied. Their connection had deepened, but not through declarations, through shared silences, exchanged glances, and that gentle trust that he wasn't just there for her, he was there with her. But even peace had its shadows. One of them arrived in the form of a voicemail. Catherine had just picked Sophie up from school when her phone buzzed. The voice on the other end was clipped, rehearsed, familiar. "Hi, this is Victoria Sheffield. I'm calling about Michael Harrison. I believe we may need to talk." Catherine sat frozen in her car, Sophie chattering in the back about spelling bees and chocolate milk, while that name curled like smoke around her heart. Sheffield, the family Michael never mentioned without changing the subject. She played the message again later that night after Sophie was asleep. Michael was on his way. Maya called right as she was about to delete the voicemail. "Are you okay?" Maya asked. "Define okay." "That's what I thought." "Spill," Catherine told her. About the message, about the tone, about the 1,000 questions rising like old ghosts. "She said she wants to talk," Catherine finished. "No details, just that." "It might be nothing," Maya offered. "But it's something." Maya paused. "Do you want to know?" Catherine looked out the window at the lamppost, casting long shadows on the porch steps. "I want to be prepared," she said quietly. "I'm tired of being blindsided by the past." When Michael arrived, he brought key lime pie from her favorite cafe and 2 worn books from his childhood. One for Sophie, one he said Catherine had to read because it made me feel brave when I was 10. She loved him a little more in that moment and hated the storm brewing between them even more. They sat side by side on the porch swing. The night air was warm, cicadas singing in the trees. Catherine didn't ease into it. "Victoria Sheffield called me." Michael's body tensed beside her. Not dramatically, just enough. "What did she say?" "She wants to talk." Didn't say why. He looked away, his jaw tight. "She's my cousin." "I figured. She's also the family's PR machine. Only calls when something needs to be managed." Catherine studied him. "Do I need to be managed?" "No," he said. "But they might think you're dangerous." "To who?" "To their control." The silence between them stretched. Catherine's voice was soft when she spoke again. "Why didn't you tell me more about them?" "Because every time I think I've escaped their orbit, they find a way to pull me back in." She touched his hand. "I'm not afraid of your past. I just want to know where I stand." Michael exhaled slowly. "I didn't build walls to keep you out. I built them because everything I used to let in almost destroyed me." Catherine nodded. "And I've spent years thinking love was something I had to survive." He turned to her completely. "We don't have to survive this. We just have to hold on." The next morning, she called Victoria back. They met at a cafe near the Riverwalk, the kind of place with pressed linen and too many spoons. Victoria arrived looking like a magazine cover. Sharp blazer, precise smile, polished voice. "I wanted to meet face to face," she said. "There's a board retreat next month. The family will be watching closely." Catherine folded her hands. "I'm not part of the family." "Not legally," Victoria replied. "But publicly, you're a narrative now, and the family doesn't like surprises." Catherine held her gaze. "I'm not a scandal," Victoria smiled thinly. "That depends on the ending." Catherine leaned in. "Let me make one thing clear. I didn't walk into Michael's life for money or press or position. I came because he looked at me like I was already whole. Victoria blinked just once. Catherine stood. "I suggest you prepare the family for a new kind of story," she said quietly. "One that doesn't end with a woman being erased." When she walked out, the weight in her chest finally lifted. Not because the conflict was over, but because she knew now. She wasn't a guest in this life. She belonged in it. Catherine sat on the edge of her bed, the gallery invitation trembling slightly in her hands, gold foil letters, soft ivory paper. Underneath the elegant typography was her name, right in the center. The grand opening was only 3 days away, and every part of her life was suddenly under a spotlight she never asked for. She could feel it pressing in, the expectation, the whispers, the judgment lingering in hallways, both public and private. It wasn't the art that scared her, not even the attention, it was what came after. Would people see the real story beneath the canvas? Would they see her, or just the version others had painted? Michael walked in quietly behind her, holding 2 mugs of chamomile tea. He set one on the nightstand and knelt in front of her. "You've been quiet," he said. Catherine looked up at him. "I'm trying not to come undone." He reached out gently, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You don't have to be perfect. You just have to show up." She smiled faintly. "That's always been the hardest part." He kissed her knuckles, slow and deliberate. "You've already done the impossible. Everything from here is legacy." She exhaled shakily, her eyes meeting his. "Promise me one thing, anything. If it all falls apart, if the gallery fails, if people talk, if I freeze in front of the press, I won't leave," he said, cutting her off. "Not for any of it. Ever." She blinked back a tear. "You keep saying things like that. Because they're true." Catherine leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. In the stillness of the room, where nothing was expected of her except to breathe and be loved, she felt something soften. 2 days later, the gallery was buzzing with energy. Strings of warm lights glowed overhead. The scent of fresh flowers and white wine mingled in the air, and local press, community leaders, friends, even a few skeptical board members made an appearance. Caroline among them, her eyes sweeping the room as if she were still measuring its worth in dollars per square foot. Catherine was in a soft blue dress, her curls pinned back, her smile steady, but her heart thundering. "Mommy!" Sophie's voice broke through the crowd as she ran toward her, arms open. Catherine scooped her up, grounding herself in the weight of her daughter's arms around her neck. "You look like a painting," Sophie whispered. Catherine laughed. "That's your magic working." "I hung your sunflower next to the front door," Sophie beamed. Maya arrived a few minutes later, radiant in a coral-wrapped dress. She hugged Catherine fiercely. "Look at you owning the room." "I'm faking it pretty well," Maya leaned in. "They don't know that, and they never will." Michael positioned himself beside her then, his hand sliding gently around her waist. "Are you ready?" he asked. "Not in the slightest," she said. He smiled. "Good. That means it matters." The gallery director tapped her glass lightly, and the room began to quiet. All eyes turned to Catherine. She stepped forward, her fingers brushing the hem of her dress, and inhaled. "Thank you," she began, her voice steady, "for showing up tonight, for the art, for the story, for the heart." She looked around the room. "My journey to this gallery wasn't traditional. I didn't come from connections or art school or grant money. I came from late nights at a diner and early mornings dressing a little girl for school. I came from loss, from love, from learning how to keep going, even when I didn't know where I was going." The room was silent, eyes drawn. "Art saved me," she continued. "But more than that, people did. People who saw me before I could see myself. People who reminded me that sometimes you have to be broken open to let the light in." Her voice cracked slightly and she paused. Michael stepped closer without interrupting, his presence anchoring her. "This space isn't just about beauty," she said. "It's about healing, about stories that never made it to the surface, and about the courage it takes to be the story when the world just wants the picture." She stepped back as applause rose, gentle at first, then growing into something warm and heartfelt. Later, after the speeches and handshakes and wine glasses had blurred into background noise, Catherine stood outside the gallery doors, the cool night air brushing her skin. Michael joined her, slipping his hand into hers. "You're incredible," he said. She looked up at the stars. "I'm tired. You should be. But I feel clear." They stood in silence, watching guests leave, watching the windows glow behind them like a beacon. "You know," Michael said, "my family saw the article." Catherine tensed slightly. "Did they say anything?" He nodded. "Caroline told me she underestimated you, that you brought more than art to that space. You brought substance." Catherine raised an eyebrow. That sounded dangerously close to a compliment. "She said you reminded her of someone. My mother." Catherine turned to him in surprise. "She was quiet," he said, "but fierce, gentle, but stubborn. The kind of woman who changed the temperature of a room just by existing." Catherine swallowed. "I wish I'd known her." "I think you have," he whispered. She leaned against him, resting her head against his chest, letting the sound of his heartbeat soothe her. Tomorrow the world could turn again. Challenges would come, voices would rise and fall. But tonight, the world was hers, and for the first time, she wasn't just surviving it, she was writing it. A warm spring breeze curled through the open windows of Catherine's new studio. The sun cast long golden stripes across the hardwood floors where Sophie's laughter echoed. There were still unopened boxes stacked in corners, new paintbrushes scattered across her desk, and a fresh canvas waiting on the easel. But everything else felt settled. It had been 3 months since the gallery opened. 3 months since Catherine had finally stopped waiting for the floor to give out from under her. 3 months since she stopped wondering if she was enough, because she was. Sophie ran through the room in mismatched socks, her curls bouncing wildly. "Mama, Michael said he wants to show us something." Catherine turned from the easel, brushing a smudge of blue from her cheek. "What is it this time? Another one of his surprises?" "He said it's big," Sophie said breathlessly. "He said you have to see it with your heart." Catherine laughed softly. "Well, in that case." She followed her daughter through the gallery lobby, now quiet between shows, past the corner where Maya had installed a permanent wall titled Unseen Stories, past the place where Caroline Harrison's name had been added to the donor plaque below Catherine's at her own request. The doors to the side courtyard were open, the scent of honeysuckle wrapping the air like silk. Michael stood at the far end in front of a wooden archway covered in climbing roses. He looked nervous. Catherine slowed her pace. "What is this?" Michael gave her a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes yet, one layered with vulnerability and something deeper. "I bought the house," he said. Catherine blinked. "What house?" He gestured to the edge of the courtyard. Beyond it, tucked under a canopy of trees, was a modest southern-style home with a wraparound porch and faded green shutters. "The one across from the gallery," he added. "The one you said looked like it had a heartbeat." She stared at him, trying to read between the lines. "I didn't buy it for me," Michael continued, stepping closer to her. "I bought it for us, for you, for Sophie, for everything we've built and everything we're still building." Her breath caught. "You said once that you needed to write your story your way," he said gently. "So I wanted to give you a place to do that with no pressure, no expectation, just love, just choice." Sophie tugged on Catherine's hand. "Can we live there, Mama? It has a porch swing." Catherine looked from her daughter's wide eyes to the man who had rewritten her vision of love. Not with promises, but with presence, with patience, with the kind of loyalty that didn't need loud declarations to be true. She walked toward him, each step deliberate. When she reached him, she whispered, "Michael." He took her hand. "Catherine, I don't need a ceremony or a title to know what we are. But if you're ready, if it feels right, I'd like to ask." He paused, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket. Inside wasn't a diamond, just a thin gold band, simple and plain, engraved with 2 words. "Come home." Tears filled her eyes. "I don't want perfect," he said softly. "I just want real. I want dinners on the porch, and unfinished paintings and mornings where we're still figuring it out." Catherine took the ring, holding it in her palm as if it were made of something more than metal. "I don't know how to be someone's wife," she admitted, Michael smiled. Good, I don't want someone's wife. I want you. She laughed through her tears, sliding the ring onto her finger. Then let's write this chapter. Behind them, Sophie clapped wildly. Are we getting married today? Can I wear glitter shoes? Catherine scooped her daughter up, holding her close. Someday, baby, but today we're just saying yes. Later that night, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned to lavender, Michael grilled vegetables while Catherine set the outdoor table. Sophie danced barefoot on the porch, humming to herself between bites of strawberry. It felt impossible, and yet somehow real. After dinner, Catherine stood alone at the shoreline, waves lapping at her feet. Michael joined her, hands in his pockets. Do you remember what you said at the beginning? Catherine asked quietly. Michael looked over. I said a lot of things. You said that sometimes all it takes is a hug. He smiled, remembering. Catherine took his hand. That hug didn't just change your life. It gave me one. The wind picked up slightly, brushing through the trees, rustling the leaves like pages turning. A new chapter had begun, not because of a job or a title or even a proposal, but because two broken people stopped trying to be perfect and started trying to be present. And in doing so, they gave each other the most radical kind of love, a place to start over together. Did you enjoy this heartwarming story? If it touched you as much as it touched me, click like, subscribe to the channel for more stories that will touch your heart. Turn on the bell so you don't miss any. Tell me in the comments, do you believe that love transcends death? Have you ever had an inexplicable experience with loved ones who have passed on? I want to hear your stories. And don't forget to share this video with that special person who needs to believe in miracles and second chances. Until the next story, a hug from the heart.